So first I'm going to compare the original Strangers to the new one, Pray at Night. Then I'm going to talk about the real-life events that supposedly inspired these movies, talk about how they're similar, how they're different. So I'll put a timestamp if you just want to talk about the real stuff. Just skip to there. But if you want to talk about the movies, first of all, why was the original Strangers such a hit? Because on paper, there's not a lot going on. Not even on paper, watching the movie, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on. Why was it so chilling for so many people? And for some people, it's on their top horror movies list. So I think if you want to boil it down, it combined this sense of random violence with just profound ordinariness. So we have serial killers. So serial killers, in some sense, it's random violence. They are targeting strangers. But with serial killers, they're built up in our mind as kind of these supernatural beings almost, like super smart, alien to us, not ordinary. And we also have all these terms, all these classifications, and all these other words that we kind of use to feel like we understand serial killers, at least we can categorize them. With strangers, it had that element of just random, unpredictable, motiveless, stranger on stranger violence, but also they didn't seem particularly supernatural strength or clever. They seemed like just normal, ordinary people who, for whatever reason, had decided to just start inflicting violence randomly. And that sense that potential exists in all of us to just, if people chose to, rather than people just getting up every day, going to work, trying to date, doing all this or the other thing, that potential exists that random people would begin just going around randomly, random violence. And of course that's not what happens in reality. Sometimes does, and I'll get to the real life cases later, but for the most part it doesn't. But this idea that it could, that, you know, not serial killers who are these hyper intelligent predators and they spend their whole lives doing this, but the idea that ordinary everyday people could be capable of this kind of random violence, not based on greed, not based on jealousy, but just based on no reason at all. And there we get to, I'm going to talk about the two things that I liked in both movies. First was the line, and the line we get in the first movie is, "Because you were home." And I don't need to talk much about that. It's such a chilling, memorable line. It was one of the reasons that the movie became such a success. I thought it had a worthy successor in the next movie. The next line was, "Why not?" And she says, "Why are you doing this? Why not?" What I liked is it's kind of meta, because a huge complaint about this movie could be why. Why would you make a movie, two movies, that have little to no plot, just a couple or a family getting terrorized with no rhyme or reason, no message, no morals supposedly. So why? Why make the movie? Why go to see the movie? Why go sit through? Why pay money to sit through a movie? And you can say, well, why not? And it's the same. So the same response to kind of engaging in this horrific random violence, the same response that could be given to that could be the same response given to a lot of things that humans do that really has no rhyme or reason if you really delve down to it, and yet we do engage in these things. Now, what I didn't like as much about the sequel was, first of all, the music. I thought that the music was a little better, the sound design was a little better in the first one. They had these songs that in a non-horror movie context you wouldn't think anything of, but suddenly you put them in a horror movie context, and these songs, they're perfectly picked and they really do take on this darker tone. Now, in Pray at Night, they did a bunch of these ironic songs where they take this power pop ballad that everyone kind of knows, and they put it, when there's violence going on, it's supposed to be ironic and cheeky, kind of like the mask they're wearing. They're smiling masks, so it's cheeky that they're wearing the masks, and the music's going. And I think it's a bit overused at this point. I've seen it a lot, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. Sometimes it can be cool, but I thought the sound design was a lot better in the original, and I thought the story with the characters that we got in the original was a lot better. So in the original, you have this couple, and he proposes, she turns him down, says I'm not ready. They come back to the house, and he's decked out the full house with rose petals and champagne, and it's just a very awkward, relatable thing you see. And then it becomes very interesting where, one, you see these two very attractive people with all this wealth, and they're just miserable the whole night, and you just, at first, you know what's going to happen, and you say, God, you shouldn't be miserable I know it sucks kind of what you're going through, but you have no idea what's in store, you know, what's in store for you. Second, you get this horrible scene at the end where they're getting, first of all, just the horror of being tied up and you're beside your loved one and you see them about to get stabbed. And what she does is she puts on the wedding ring. And then right before he's about to get stabbed, she shows him the wedding ring. And it's just such a gut-wrenching moment. Why did she do that? Was it just the only thing she could think of to comfort him in those last moments? And she realized that maybe, you know, it wasn't much, but she could give him a little bit of happiness in that final moment, maybe. Or was it maybe just instinctual? She didn't know why she did it. Was it her finally realizing that, wow, I really shouldn't have said I wasn't ready. I should have really rushed into things more because life is so fleeting and you never know. So just really interesting and memorable story, I thought. A backstory to the characters that I thought it was a little more generic and I didn't quite like as much in Pray at Night. Now, moving to the real life story. So first of all, the Manson murders that it says it's based on. Now, we associate those Manson murders with weird apocalyptic beliefs and cults and just unexplainable random violence, but it's the real story is Charles Manson realized first he was a pimp. So his cult of these women, and the Beach Boys, he wanted to record a song with the drummer of the Beach Boys and stay at his house. And he would just offer this member of the Beach Boys sexual favors with his cult followers. He wanted to stay at a ranch. And again, he would just offer these women that was with, he'd just offer them up as sexual favors. So you can view Manson's cult as a kind of weird semi-religious thing, or you can view it as Manson, he was already a pimp in his life, and he just kind of continued to do all the same things he learned pimping and just kind of rebranded it a bit and realized that it had all this mystique if he framed it as he's some kind of quasi-religious figure. And what occurs is he targets this house, the Tate, and it's Roman Polanski, it's his house, but he's gone, so Sharon Tate, his wife, is there, his pregnant wife. Now, some people say, oh, it's just a random house, he's targeting any rich person. No, so Charles Manson, actually, he was a pretty talented musician, relatively speaking. He wanted to get a record deal, and he was working with this record producer, and the producer dropped him. Now, Charles Manson was very angry at that, and the house that he targeted was actually that guy's house, but he had moved out, and Manson, by targeting the same house that the guy had moved from, he thought he could kind of send a message, kind of scare that guy a bit. So already, it's not random. You have the banality of the very common human thing of revenge and kind of anger and jealousy. And then also Manson, he had killed a couple people previously who were just drug dealers, and there was like drug issues gone wrong, and Manson had murdered this person, and then one of his followers murdered this person, was actually in jail and held for questioning. So Manson was kind of worried about this person flipping on him and turning him in. So when Manson went and sent his followers to that house, he had them do the same stuff that was at this other murder. So police would see this new crime with all the same stuff from the old crime, and then release that Manson follower so she wouldn't turn on him and turn him in. So again, you've gone from having it be this weird satanic occult thing to it was a guy who was trying to deflect and cover up another crime, and was also pissed and mad at someone who rejected them. So you've gone from something so otherworldly and so impossible to understand and comprehend to someone who's a pimp and has learned how to control women and use women to his advantage and break women down, and trying to cover up crimes, trying to cover up the crime of a drug deal gone wrong, and suddenly you're at one of the most ordinary stories ever. So it's just fascinating how maybe the mystique that's built up around these Manson murders is what inspired this movie. But as far as the actual events being a good example of just random, unexplainable violence, not particularly good at all. The other murders, a little better. There was a family, they went to a cabin and they were all murdered, and they never caught anyone. So that's why I guess you could say it's kind of random, but they do have suspects, and some of the suspects did have personal ties and reasons for it. So even in that case, it wasn't like there were no suspects, they just never were able to catch anyone. So I do think you could say it is shockingly rare. Oftentimes we see what appears to be random violence, but sometimes just haven't been able to make the connection. to something else. So I think that the appearance of actual random violence is mostly serial killers, and serial killers are relatively rare. So the problem of violence is much more so these kind of personal, when you know someone. So when you watch these movies, part of that is it's an irrational fear. So when you watch strangers, get scared by it, but don't then live your life thinking that it's a rational fear that immediately strangers are going to burst in and attack me. But it's not a rational fear.